大家好，我是天怡。今天是4月17号，纽约市皇后区市议会第30选区市议会的市议员候选人史密斯先生，今天来到法拉盛的这个天广广场12楼，跟中文媒体举行一个茶叙会，所以我们现在先上去看一下这位史明思先生。重要的选区里面有13%到14%的亚洲的那个投票人，可能会越来越多，人数会越来越多，所以说这很重要。我选择跟华文媒体进行一个茶叙会，会敲他们的门，然后我得到了那个国会议员孟昭文的支持，然后顾亚明也是很大的帮助。黄敏仪、庄文仪他们都很支持我。我跟那个黄敏仪也是合作的非常紧密。然后我已经卷入政治17年了，16到17年了。所以我跟这些纽约市的这些官员一起合作，然后支持他们。孟昭文啊，这像孟昭文啊、Tom 啊，那个区长、华会区长 Richard 他们都是很直接的表达支持。那个顾亚明对我的支持也是非常的力度很大，甚至给我捐款。当然他现在已经不能给我捐款了，他现在是在办公室工作，但是他是真的是非常支持我。至于我就是现在他们支持我的原因，是因为我非常对这个安全、社区的安全很看重。
You know, I don't think it's just one district or another district. It's very it's the single. It's we're the richest city, one of the richest cities in the world, and it's very important that everybody who lives here, regardless of your financial status, have a neighborhood that's safe and that they feel safe in. So I was raised in Ireland. I was born here, but I was only a few weeks old, and my parents moved back to Ireland. So I was raised in Ireland. Until I was about 20. Just before I turned 20, I came to the United States. So my journey is the same as any immigrant journey. You know, you come over here. I didn't have $297 in my pocket. I stayed at a YMC hostel in Manhattan, and back then the YMC hostels were not like they are today. I know the struggles of any immigrant. I've been through them. I worked a lot of menial jobs on construction sites. I started out as a janitor and a gardener in parochial schools, in Catholic schools and public schools. I cleaned the classrooms, washed the floors, done all of that stuff. And then I went to college at night. I understand the importance of education. It was instilled in me I was very, very young. So while going through all that, I got my bachelor's degree at Queens College. I then got a job in 2000 as a substitute teacher in Queens. And I think one of the things I noticed then is they couldn't get teachers back in 2000. The salary was so low. I mean, it was really bad. I think I started at like $29,000 or $30,000 a year. I know it seems a long time ago, 20 years, but it's not. There was people making a lot more money than that. So it was very hard to get in good teachers. And I remember one of the biggest advocates for focusing on teacher salaries was Senator Chuck Schumer. He made it a thing that, and I always have to say this with great trepidation because I don't want to insult anyone who had come into education before, because they came in with an enthusiasm and an excitement to be teachers. But it was getting harder and harder as people were graduating college to get the top people coming out of the classes who wanted to be educators. Because you're now, at this point, by the late 1990s, you're accruing a large student debt. So you want to go into a profession that can matter. So I worked, as I say, many different jobs over the 1990s. Became a substitute teacher in 2000. A couple of years later, I was appointed full-time. And I worked there for about 9 years as a middle school teacher, teaching special education students and the SP class, the advanced AP classes. I did both at the same time, so it was a fascinating difference, right? So I would have one class that was very, very special needs, and then I had other kids that were very advanced. And how do I say this? Listen, I'm very direct. Irish people, we tend to be very direct, so if I say anything wrong, just, give me a look. One of the things I noticed and again, I taught in a school in Elmhurst in Queens. We had a large Asian population in the advanced classes, not the overall school body. And that was fascinating to me because it showed me the importance. If this was another media group, I would be getting into trouble now. But it did. It showed me the importance of how Asian community took education. It was very, very important. And I'm not saying other communities didn't, but there was a huge emphasis when my kids left 7th grade. I only taught 7th grade for 1 year. I was 8th grade. But they would go to after-school classes, get themselves ready for the high school end, focusing on where they were going to high school. And that taught me a lot. But it also showed me that there are a variety of reasons where other students, some students don't do as well. And those are the issues. You need an educator as the chair of the education committee. You don't need a politician. So I'll be a politician, but I'm also a 25-year teacher. And what greater person to have not only in government, but a teacher. We have an understanding for our students. We have a connection to their families. And we understand the neighborhoods and the wants and needs. So my journey took me from Ireland. My father was a bus mechanic. My mother grew up in a very rural town in Ireland, very rural town. If I showed you a picture of the house, it had a thatched straw roof, and it was very rural. So she grew up there and instilled in me the importance of education. She died before I became a teacher, but she would have been very proud that I went into education. So it means a lot to me, and I want to bring that skill set to the city council and to city government. I will not just be a council member for District 30. I will be a voice for all of this city and for all of our communities. And I promise you this, I know how important education is to you. I understand it. And as I say, there are many different valves and stuff you have to address. Nothing will happen in New York City public schools that will negatively impact your community or your students or their families. I can give you my word on that. I will make it a priority that everything is addressed on an individual basis based on district. I kind of wandered off my bio there. So when I got involved in the UFT, it was early on in my teaching career. I started to see issues within the school that we couldn't address, because every time there was a new chancellor, new superintendent, they came in with new ideas and would just throw them up, call all the staff in, and here's the way you have to teach now. Here's what you have to do now. And we had no say in it. So I started to become very involved in my school, knowing that I had such a vast range of students in my school. Some needed a tremendous amount of attention, and others just needed guidance. And there's a difference. A teacher is not just there to give you information, they're also there to just guide you, because some of our advanced students, they do incredible. They just need to be guided in the right way. They don't need to stand at the front of the classroom and lecture all day. They need to be guided. So I got involved in the UFT because I felt within our school building, the educators weren't having an input into how we teach our children and how we address the different needs of the different student needs that we had in the building. I was very shortly in the UFT, and they promoted me because I worked not only in my school, but I worked with the superintendent in a lot of the schools in District 24. In fact, I'll tell you a little known story. Do you remember Michael Bloomberg was the mayor? So he had a chancellor called Joel Klein. Now Joel Klein, Michael Bloomberg came in, and one of his first issues was no mayor before him had control over the chancellor. The chancellor was an independent hire. Independent hire. He decided, I'm taking control of it. He was the only mayor to do that. And he took control of the Department of Education, and the chancellor was a direct answer now to the mayor. That chancellor was Joel Klein. Now Joel Klein was a national renowned leader in government at the time. So it was a big step down from him, but he was good at organizing things. I'm not saying I agreed with everything he did. So the short story is this. Him and I got to know each other because I didn't like some of the things that were being done in my school and the district, and I would email him, and he would email me back. And then he invited me out for dinner. So we went out for dinner. He picked me up, and we met, we went out for dinner, and then he offered me a job to be a principal of one of the new high schools that he was opening. So him and I met, we had many exchanges, and he sent me for an interview. And I remember going to this back room down in Long Island City, where it was all the big people with the DOE, and they were interviewing principal candidates for a school. And I went in, and it was a room like this, and everybody had letters from somebody high up in the DOE or a resume and everything. And I didn't have anything because he had told me to go here to this meeting. And they're walking around the room and they're collecting how the different people got their invite to this interview. And I was getting nervous. I was like, oh my God, I don't have anything. And then the woman that came around, you're Dermot Smith. And I said, yeah, it's okay, he just called us. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I didn't have to have a letter. Then I went in from my panel with the 4 people that were superintendents and the leaders of the DOE. And they said, okay, so the chancellor called. We don't have to go through the process. We're offering you a job to take one of our high schools on. They liked my philosophy on education. And they said, we'll give you 3 years to see how that will work out. And that is the conversation I'd had with him the day before, 2 days before. And that's the conversation I had then. And I was all willing to do it. And then at the end of the meeting, they said, well, we just want you to sign something. And they gave me a piece of paper. And they said, you just have to agree to do these certain things in your school. And I said, that's not my understanding of what that is. I said he was going to let me experiment with some of the ideas that I had laid out for him. Anyway, sorry. I'm an Irishman. I go on. I left. I went out, sat in the car for a while, and I called the chancellor. And I had then been offered a job at the UFT. Unbeknownst to them, Joe Klein had offered me a job. And I had shortened that story. I had a cell number. We talked all the time. But then I got offered a job in the UFT, in which it was a very significant role in which I could impact the elected officials on how they addressed education. Because as I said earlier, politics has far too often creeped into our classrooms, and it's affecting how the students learn and how the teachers teach. So I weighed both of those options up, and I declined the opportunity to lead that high school, and I went into public education. So I went into the UFT. So that's how my journey. But the UFT didn't know the chancellor was offering me a job. The chancellor didn't know they were offering me a job. I say that not to sound in any way braggadocio, but I had some good ideas. And now after 16 years of working inside government and trying to get our elected officials to take a different look and a different approach to public education, both our state officials and our city officials, I now believe I have the experience and the connections and the relationships to actually go in there and do it. Because if I get elected, I don't think anybody's going to stop me chairing an education committee. I don't think anybody's going to stop me being in that leadership room. And you need somebody in the decision-making room. There's only 5 or 6 people in that decision-making room. The rest of the government, the rest of the elected officials sit outside that room. So that will go back to about the common sense caucus. If I go into a minority caucus, I'm out at the back of the room. I want to be at this table making the decisions. And I believe I'll be able to make some positive decisions. And I'll do none of them without talking to all of the groups involved, including our superintendents. Long answer, sorry. Unless they'll be mad at me for my long answers. But a very good question. A lot of people have asked me that. They're like, Dermot, and this is what's frightening about it. A lot of people in politics have said to me, Dermot, you're taking a step down in the job of influence you have to go into city government. And that's what's wrong right now in New York City. Being an elected official should not be an entry-level job, and it should not be a step down from another job. It should be a step up, because you're affecting people's lives. You're affecting not only your students, their families, you're affecting everybody. So I always bristle when people would say, Dermot, what are you doing? Like, why now? I'm doing it now because more people with the skill sets and experience that I have in different areas should be going into government. They should be going into. I remember Peter Koo went into government. People often said, why are you running for office? Peter Koo was a very successful businessman. Very successful man. We call him the Lord Mayor of Flushing. But Peter Koo went into government and he brought a completely new, fresh set of eyes on small businesses and a whole new approach onto how government was supposed to interact with our small business community. And what I'm trying to do now is be another person in that vein that comes in with a skill set that comes into government where people are not going to be like, oh, who's this kid or who's this? And it's not even about age. I know people my age and that and older that go into government, but they have no experience on how to get something done. They just say all the right things to impress. They say all the right things to the media just to, so you'll put a positive message out about them. There's nothing in my background that would say I'm not overly qualified for this job. And I'm hoping more people will follow in my footsteps, experienced people. Yeah, so I told you I'm very direct, so I have to be careful. So one of the things I can say is this. Do you mind if I give you an analogy and you'll be able to, because I have to be careful. There's a negative resource in the city government, and it has to go somewhere. If you're not in that leadership room, that problem is going to get passed around to somebody outside that leadership, and it's going to end up in a place that people don't want it there. There was one all-male, as far as I know, I could be wrong, but there's one all-male shelter in the city. They weren't putting it in Manhattan, let's be honest. They weren't going to put it in Manhattan. They weren't putting it in Brooklyn, right? The mayor even at the time was from Brooklyn. There's a lot of powerful leaders in Brooklyn. So then you go around and you look and you see where it goes. If you're part of a small group of people that are not able to make those decisions for a variety of different reasons, then the decision gets made for you. I will make sure that the issues get addressed correctly. Now, homeless shelters are a reality because there's an issue. There's a homeless crisis in the city, and there's a mental health crisis. So instead of passing around where does the homeless shelter go, we have to address what we do with the mental health crisis. Years ago, I think it was back in the 1970s, we shut down all of these mental health facilities. I want to take a different approach. These homeless people, some of them were wandering around off their medications, are somebody's son and daughter. It's inhumane to have them living on the streets the way they're living. It's wrong. And it was done by an idealistic group of very progressive politicians. And it was silly and it's not fair. So I don't believe we need an all-male homeless shelter anywhere in the city, whether it's in my district or any district. These people should be in facilities in which they have a clean bed, sheets, and are getting their medication. Dumping them into a community, any community, whether it's in Glendale or anywhere else, all it is moving a problem around. I want to address the problem. We have the ability to house these people. The word has a negative connotation, but just hear me out. There are institutions for people to be cared for. My father right now is going to be 94 next week. And he lives in Ireland with my sisters. But his health has declined in the last several months to the point where he doesn't really know where he is or what he's doing. But if I didn't have a family there, he'd be wandering the streets as an elderly man homeless. So now he's getting moved to a care facility where there's doctors around the clock, nurses around the clock, where he'll be given his medications. That's the approach we have to go back to. And we're a modern society now, so it's not like years ago when they would talk about all the abuse that would happen in these institutions. We have cameras everywhere. We're going to hire the best healthcare providers. We have some of the finest nurses in this city from all different countries. And we can address those by not moving those problems around, by creating places for these people to be treated humanely. So the Glendale facility, I've already started looking into, but I'm not in government. That is a facility that can be utilized in many different ways. Whether it's a rehabilitation center, whether it's a senior center, or whether it's a school. But you can't just say, oh, I don't want it here, and then the facility is left vacant. You have to come up with a solution for what the facility is, and then what are you doing with the people that are now moved out of it? That's how government works. We can all come in and say, oh, it's not going in my neighborhood, it's there, so now I have to address it. I can't just say, I'm going to take all the power I have in the city council and dump it in someone else's neighborhood. That's not fair either. So we have to create a solution to this problem, and that solution has been staring us in the face for a long time. People just don't want to do it because they think it's inhumane. It's not inhumane. It's inhumane to leave these people on the streets starving, without their medication, and uncared for. I'll take care of it. I'll lead. I've been talking to some people, and we're going to make addressing that issue a priority so it's not moved around to other districts. Sorry.
So that kind of facility is different from the shelter people are.
Oh yeah, it's not shelters. So we have, you know, Creedmoor, all right? Creedmoor is now a day facility. Have you seen the size of Creedmoor? I mean, There is a place that would alleviate a tremendous amount of homelessness on our streets. A tremendous amount, where they're fed, they're taken care of, they're medicated. Many of our homeless, not all, but many of our homeless are totally unaware of what's going on. They're severely mentally impacted, and we have to address that. So homeless shelters are not the answer. There are many, many other facilities that are available that we're not utilizing correctly. And that's just about taking a stand and being rational and reasonable and addressing the issue. A place where they stay overnight, a place where they're fully cared for. If you're unable to take care of yourself, then there is a burden on a burden of responsibility, or a burden is the wrong word. There's a responsibility in society, a moral society, to take care of you. Having them wander the streets in rags and eating out of garbage cans is a disservice to them and to the community around them. You shouldn't be walking down the street and seeing someone in a doorway sleeping in a sleeping bag who's urinated and defecated all over the place. He needs to be in a facility. Yeah. I mean, the only way to do that is to close that center. And the only way you can close that center is you have to have a two-part plan. You have to, what's going there, you have to have that, and where are they going? All right? So the way you're doing that, I could say, by the way, that facility is not in my district. It used to be in the council district, it's not. But I don't want to, but I don't want to, so that's why I'm walking carefully, because there's 2 other council members involved in that. I'm not elected, so I'm trying to be respectful to everybody. But it's not in my district, but I will help whoever it is. I know the council member there now. And I will work with them to make sure that facilities and facilities like that, it is absolutely horrendous what's going on in that neighborhood. And that's a residential neighborhood. If you've ever been over, it's a residential neighborhood, and it's very close to a school. There's a lot of drug use, and it gets problematic because the longer those residents stay there, they can then claim residency there, and it gets harder and harder to move them. So when you put a place like that in a community, it gets very difficult to move it. So as I say, the first thing that has to be addressed is, what's we going to use the facility for? Once we come up with a plan for that, and I have many different ideas that I don't want to go into now out of respect for the other council members there. When I get into government, I will take care of it. But yes, I will address working with everybody involved to have that moved, but have those people not just dumped in another neighborhood, the whole issue taken care of. If you were to take a look at the New York City budget and the amount of money that's spent in these shelters and housing these people, it's astronomical. Astronomical. So no one is saying you need to increase the spend. We're now saying, I'm saying we target that in a better way. You shouldn't have homeless people in motels and hotels. You shouldn't have these manufactured homeless. They're all paid for. Someone has to get paid. The owners have to get paid. So there is a revenue there that can be better utilized in building facilities or using buildings that are no longer used, whatever they're renovating them, and making sure that these patients, and they're patients, at the end of the day, they're medical patients, and they need to be put in medical facilities so that they're cared for.